So this is going to be the first of, I believe, 3 or 4 classes on the same overarching subject of major debates within the Jewish communities or the Jewish people that almost broke us. And we survived, but I wanted to teach that because when you learn Jewish history, you see that you can never take anything for granted. And when we look at the current situation, either within Israel, the major split within this country, between the Jews in the diaspora and Jews in Israel, we have a lot of fractions, we have a lot of very strong debates. Last week we met here and talked about the election in New York City. Yeah, sometimes the polls are right, and last week it showed about 10% the advantage to Mamdani, and that's more or less what he got. But it was really interesting to see this election in terms of the split within the Jewish community. Okay, so for some Jews, if you're a Jew who votes for Mamdani, you're a self-hating Jew, you're a traitor. For some Jews, no, he represents us more, and those who support the Israeli government are the traitor, are the bad Jews. And when we start labeling each other as a bad Jew, we get into trouble. And what we are going to see today is the first split of the Jewish community. We're going to read one chapter from the Bible, but then I'm going to look at it from a different perspective based on the most recent scholarship and archaeology. Because the nice thing that we have is that we have the ancient text, but now we know how to read the ground, meaning archaeology, as well as we have an access now that until recently we didn't, to what we call extra-biblical text, which means texts that describe the situation of the Jews, but not our Bible, not Jewish sources, but extra. Okay, so other nations write about ancient Israel, which has a great value, because when we write about ourselves, of course, we have a limited perspective. Or when we as Jews write about another group of Jews, we have a different perspective. But when a complete outsider writes about us, it gives us a much wider picture. So please take the text of 1 Kings chapter 12. So since it's 1 King, how many books of Kings we have? 2. Why do we have 2 books of Kings, King 1 and Kings 2? Because it's too big to put on one scroll. I'm not kidding, that's it. A lot of the explanations stem from practical needs. And when you look at these books, we have few. We have the books of Samuel, we have Chronicles 1 and 2. So when they are very big, they just couldn't. You can attach as many panels to a scroll, but at one point, you cannot really use it. So that's the only difference, okay? That's why it's 1 King. And 1 Kings, or the books of Kings, not just first and second, tell us the stories of the kings of ancient Israel. Actually, it begins with the previous book of Samuel. This chapter, to understand it, we have to go a little bit back to who were the ancient Israelites. So let me start at the year of 1200 BCE, more or less, which means 3,200 years ago. Okay? There were a group of tribes. We like to call them 12, but when you read your Bible, you see that there are many different lists of tribes, but it was established as the 12 tribes. And each tribe was quite independent, but they had some shared identity. They shared a god. They lived within one proximity, and they all hated the other nations around them. Okay, so you will look at the map later on and you'll see what exactly I mean. But Israel was a confederacy of 12 separate tribes. Sometimes they got together mainly to fight against somebody else. Okay, so you know what, let's look at the map, for example. Look at the Mediterranean Sea and find the Philistines. You see the Philistines by the sea? The Philistines were the arch enemy of Israel. They were really strong, really sophisticated, for a good reason. They did not come from this area. They came from Greece, okay, from the Greek islands, and they were technologically much more advanced than all the nations who lived over here, the Israel and Moab and Ammon and all the other nations you see here. Okay, so the Greeks were they were much more sophisticated than anyone else. They arrived in that area for different reasons, and they even had a very good sense of real estate, because you see where they settled along the Mediterranean Sea. You see the city of Gaza, for example. It's the same Gaza today. Okay? It's just interesting to see that Gaza has never been part of Israel, not even in antiquity. Okay? It was always a foreign land, but these were the Philistines. So when few tribes were attacked by the Philistines, and the Philistines were really strong, they had to get together to cooperate to fight against the Philistines. If they were attacked, if you see there, by the Ammonites, Ammon, so different group of tribes who border Ammon got together to fight. So for about 200 years, that was the system. 12 tribes with a loose connection between them. However, around the year 1000, the Philistines got so strong, they were so threatening, that the tribes realized they need to unite and they need to have a king. Before that, they didn't have a king. They had different chieftains. That's each time some of them, one of them led. Actually, one time it was even a woman, Deborah. But for the most part, it was just the heads of the tribes, but they realized we need a king to rule over all the tribes. The first king was Saul, not David, Saul. But Saul did not do a great job, and definitely the Bible doesn't like him. The one who succeeded him, probably by killing his entire family, and was King David. Okay, so David is known as our ultimate king because he really was able to unite all the tribes. That was around the year of 1000 BCE, 3,000 years ago. That's why a few years ago we celebrated the 3,000th anniversary of Jerusalem. It was about 5-6 years ago, I don't know. They found a date. Of course, it's not exactly the date, but a good reason for celebrations. The son of David was Solomon, who was able to inherit the United Kingdom, that's how they called it, and ruled it. So between David and Solomon, for 70 years, all the tribes were united under one king. And here is this is where our story begins. Okay, so just think about it. Only 70 years, all the people of Israel were together, one kingdom. Let me read it, because we need the mic for the Zoom. Rehoboam was the son of Solomon, who assumed that since he was the son, he will be the next king after the death of his father. Okay, just like Solomon became the king after the death of his father, David. So Rehoboam went to Shechem. Can you find Shechem in the map, it's in Israel. Okay, it's just underneath the word Israel. You have Tirza and you have Shechem or Shechem. Do you see it? Okay, so he went to Shechem, and for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him a king. He assumed he was going to be enthroned as the new king. When Jeroboam was another person who had some troubles, son of Nebat, heard of it. He was still in Egypt. He had to escape from Solomon, who wanted to kill him, but it doesn't matter right now. But just remember Jeroboam. Where he had fled from King Solomon, he returned from Egypt. They sent and called him, and Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel came to Rehoboam and said, so all the Jews are in Shechem, and Rehoboam is expected to be enthroned, but they tell him, not so fast. Let's start to negotiate here and see how they say. Verse 4, your father put a hard yoke on us. Now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke your father laid on us, and we will serve you. He said to them, go away for 3 days, then come back to me. So the people left. So what did the people want from Rehoboam before they approve him, elect him as a king? What did they want? Less taxes. Less taxes. No, literally, less taxes. Solomon was a major builder. He loved to build. He was a huge spender. And the Bible describes all of his endeavors. And when you have to build all these huge palaces and you have an army, you need a lot of money. How do you get our money? You have taxes. Not only that people had to pay more and more taxes, they also had to physically work for the king. So every month, a different tribe had to serve the king. Okay? That was a lot. It was not fun to live, to be an ordinary person under the rule of King Solomon. So when his son wanted to be the king, they said, okay, but we're not going to continue like that. It's crazy. We're not going to pay so much taxes. We're not going to take a month off every year to serve you. So he said, okay, let me think. 3 days. Sounds fair. So far, so good? Please interrupt immediately. Don't wait. King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had stood before Solomon his father while he lived. How do you advise me to answer these people? So first we went to the elders, to the smart people, and asked them. And look at 7, it's beautiful. They said to him, if today you will be a servant to these people, serve them and speak good word to them, they will be your servants forever. What was the advice they told him? You're campaigning now. Just promise everything. Let them elect you and then do whatever you want. But don't fight with them now. You need their vote. They don't use the word vote, but it's not so far away, right? You need them to crown you. It doesn't matter if Rehoboam said, oh, God wants me to be the... They didn't care. The king needed the consent of the people. I'm not calling it democracy, but the people had a lot of power. So if you want the support of the people and they have some demands, you say yes. And then whatever happens. We see it before every election, right? But that's a system. The politicians promise, and then they give you whatever they can. But you have to convince the people that you will be on their side. Oh. It's always the same thing when in a system when you need the people to reconfirm or confirm the king or the ruler, yes, they need to agree. But that was the advice of the elders. Number 8. Oh. Number 8. But he, Rehoboam, rejected the advice of the elders and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and now stood before him. Right? He didn't really care for his father's counselors. He decided to go to his buddies, those who were his peers, and ask for their advice. And what did they say? What did they say? He asked them, what do you advise me that I should answer these people who have said, lighten the yoke your father put on us? The young man who had grown up with him said, tell the people who said to you, your father made your yoke heavy, but you lighten it. You should say, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Now then, my father loaded you with heavy yoke. I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips. I will discipline you with scorpions. The translation here tries to be politically correct. It's not written my little finger. It's my little thing. It was completely sexual, meaning my penis is much larger than my father's loins. So if you think that he was a big shot, look at me. So what is it? What did they tell him to say to the people? To give them what they wanted? Just the opposite. Show them who is the man. If you thought my father was tough, I'll show you tough. Well, let's see how it worked out for him. 12. 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam. As the king had said, come to me again at the 3rd day. The king answered the people harshly. He rejected the elders' advice and spoke to them according to the advice of the young men. My father made your yoke heavy. I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips. I will discipline you with scorpions. So the king did not listen to the people, for this turn of event was from the Lord to fulfill the word of the Lord that spoken through Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam son of Nevat. Verse 15, you can sort of put in parentheses, because the editor here tells us it's not that Rehoboam really did it. Why did he say what he said? God made him do it, right? To punish his father. That's a different story, but that's what he said. 16, when all Israel saw that the king would not listen to them, the people answered the king, what share do we have in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Jesse was David's father. To your tents, Israel. Now, look after your house, David. So Israel went to their tents. What does it mean? All the 10 northern tribes said to him, well, no, we don't want you. We have really no interest in the legacy of David. He's not our king or anything. We are going to have our own kingdom now. Okay, you didn't listen to us. They said, this is a great line. They say to him, where is that? To your tents, Israel. Now look after your own house. 17. But Rehoboam reigned over the Israelites who lived in the towns of Judah. King Rehoboam, we can skip that. Verse 20, when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had returned, they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over Israel. There was none who followed the house of David except the tribe of Judah alone. Let's go to the map now before we continue. I made copies of the map. It's a nice map to keep if you want to understand ancient Israel. So you see Israel in green in the north, and you see underneath Judah. Okay? So far, so good? You all have it? Judah was only one tribe. It was a large tribe. It was the tribe of David and Solomon and Rehoboam. Israel is the rest of the tribes. Okay, the 10 tribes. You probably want to ask me why 10 plus 1 is still 11, so why we talk about 12? Because the tribe of Levi did not have a territory. They served at the temple. Okay, so they didn't have their own physical place. So all Israel is in the green, told Rehoboam, we're not interested in you. You're not going to be our king. Only the people of Judah, the people of the tribe of Judah, the people of Rehoboam, crowned him to be a king. So at this point, we have two kingdoms now. We have Judah and we have Israel. The king of Judah was Rehoboam. The king of Israel was Jeroboam. I know, I wish they had different names like Moses and Aaron or something, but it's confusing also in Hebrew. In all the tests that we took, they're way too similar, but these were their names. Now, before we continue, I want you to take a minute and look at the map. And just according to the map, don't look at anything else. Tell me which country now is better and why? Who do you think did better? Who do you think was in a better position to succeed? Israel in the north or Judah in the south? So Israel, why Israel? Sorry? So first of all, they have an access to the sea. Okay, Judah has nothing. Okay, good. Super important, good. More, what can you say just by the map? Much more territory. Something you cannot tell by the math, but I can tell you, and that's according to a recent scholarship, Israel had between 300,000 and 400,000 people. Judah had 100 or 120,000. So Israel was 3 to 4 times larger than Judah. So it had a bigger territory and a much larger population. Okay, what else can you say about it just from the map? The colors here are important. I know that the other nations are less, but green versus this yellowish, brownish. Israel, especially the valley of Jezreel, is green. That was the basket of grain, of food of the entire area. Who has been to Israel? So most of you have been to Israel. When you go north, it's beautiful, it's green, tons of fields. And when you go south from Jerusalem, what do you get? Desert. Okay, so Judah basically was a desert. Very hilly desert. Israel was green and lush and full of great soil and grain. And so all the things that we know about, like land of milk and honey, it all comes from the north. Judah didn't have much, okay? What you cannot tell from the map, but I will tell you why Israel was so much more successful. So you see here the Philistines. Okay, by the way, there is something that is not fair that the English language does to the Philistines. Because if you call somebody Philistine, what do you mean by that? They are the unsophisticated, right? They are the low class. It was just the opposite. The Philistines were the super sophisticated. And when you look at their archaeology books, you see the pottery of the Philistines. Gorgeous. Just think about the Greek things, the black ones with the gold illustrations. The Israelite ones, just boring, brown, functional thing. The Philistines knew how to deal with iron. This is the beginning of the Iron Era. Israelites were not there yet. Okay, so for you to know, so the Philistines today, they were the good ones, at least when it came to technology, to art. They were much more advanced than the Israelites. So go to the Philistines. What is south of there? It's not on the map, but what goes south of the Philistines? What's Egypt? Sinai Desert and Egypt, right? We can see a little bit the Phoenicia in the north. And you see Aram, the Arameans, or Syria or Assyria. These were the main three forces at the time, and Babylon later on. Now, let me describe to you the route that went from Egypt in the south to the north and to the east. So it goes more or less across the shore here through the Philistines, okay, and then take it across the shore more or less until a huge town here that is called Megiddo. Do you see Megiddo? Just keep going north. Just Megiddo is a little bit over the letters of Israel. Do you see Megiddo? So from Megiddo, go east, and you see the Jordan River? You see this little blue thing? This is the Sea of Galilee. Okay, so now climb up north. Do you see Dan? Okay, that was the main route between Egypt and Phoenicia and Assyria. Okay, this route went through Israel for the most part. That's, by the way, one of the main reasons that Israel got always stuck between countries who fought against each other. If you go to Megiddo and if you learn the history of Megiddo, often fights between Egypt and whoever controlled the north, the Hittites, took place on the land of Israel. That's a bad thing. The good thing is all the traders went through Israel. That's why they were big. That's why they were super successful. That's why Israel was so important. Economically, strategically, it was well known around the ancient Near East, while Judah is almost never mentioned. Just not important, a piece of dry earth, of a desert. Okay? So that's just from the looking at the map. So when the people of the north, the 10 tribes, where it became Israel later on, told Rehoboam, we're not interested in you, that was a big deal. Now, those of us who read the Bible always think that Judah was better, because we are known as Jews, meaning descendants of Judah, not as Israelites. And I'll explain later on why. But the Bible was written by the people of Judah later on, we'll see. Okay, so those of us who learn history from the Bible think that the Northerners were a bunch of losers, and the real power and sophistication and everything was in Judah. But scholars today tell us, no, that was not even close to reality. Any questions or comments? Canaan and Canaanites. That's a great question, because the Bible talks about Canaan in two different ways. One is the ancient name of Israel. Okay, so when Abraham was told by God to go to the promised land, it was known as the land of Canaan. It was a specific area. However, sometimes Canaan is a specific small nation within this territory. But for the most part, when we talk about Canaan, we talk about ancient Israel.
Where did they enter into this?
I heard, I didn't hear the last thing you asked.
Where did Aaron enter with the Israelis after 40 years on the map? Did they come in the bottom of Judah?
So you're talking about where they entered from? Okay, that took place before. They entered the land. So let's put that event now at 930 BCE. They entered the land at 1200 BCE. And they entered the land from the east. They had to cross the Jordan River. If you read the book of Exodus that described the journey of the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land, which took 40 years, they didn't go straight from the Negev, from the Sinai Desert north. They went north and then all the way east and then went west. Yeah, different. I hope I answered that question. More.
So looking at the map, ideally, kings were not the plan, right?
Ideally,
There weren't supposed to be kings, correct? They just asked for them, so that's why Saul became king?
yes.
So
and
if
no.
we're looking at the map, if there were never kings, would it look any different?
So the Bible has two separate opinions about kings. So initially, the Torah says the Jews should not have a king. Why is that? God is the king, okay? However, the reality demanded a king because God, is important, but God does not really lead you in wars, especially against mighty armies. You need a leader. And all the other nations around had a leader by the title king. So the people of Israel went to Samuel, who was the prophet, who was the representative of God, and said, we want a king. We need a king. And Samuel got really angry with them. He said, no, we don't need a king. You're rebelling against God. God is your king, blah, blah, blah. And then God told him, Samuel, come down. They need a king. Because we don't believe in miracles for the most part, and we don't believe in a God who is going to fight for us. Maybe he's going to, or she is going to help us and strengthen us, but we have to fight. Okay, we don't stand and pray, despite what some people today in Israel are saying. Praying is not going to land us victorious. And the Bible says it explicitly all the time. You have to fight. You have to give everything you have, and then God will help you. Okay, so yes, so the Bible at one point said no kings, but of course there were kings. And then the Bible changed it. But if there are kings, they should be from the line of David. Okay, but we have two conflicting ideas. But it is reconciled as just a compromise, If the people were so good, God would have been enough. But since the people are not so good, they need a flesh and blood leader, a king. Okay, ready to continue? Because it's getting to be more interesting, or at least for me. I like this stuff. We're at verse 21, correct? I believe so. So when Rehoboam came to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, which was tiny, 180,000 chosen warriors. Don't believe these numbers. Never believe numbers in the Bible. To fight against the house of Israel, to restore the kingdom of Rehoboam, son of Solomon. Okay? It's as if today Venezuela decide to attack the United States. Not going to be successful, okay? Just not a fair fight. You can be angry, you can curse them, you can do whatever, you can send some terrorists, but it's not going to. But Rehoboam, who had to show that he was the man, was ready to fight against all odds, 22-24. And before I read it, I have to remind you, the Bible never meant to teach us history in the modern sense of the word today. The Bible is concerned about theology. It tells the story of God. Okay, so everything is from the perspective of God. The whole idea of history, just telling the events as they supposedly occurred, at the most objective way is a modern concept. Okay? When people wrote their chronicles, what was the main object? To glorify God or to glorify the kings? And it is true. It was always written by the victorious, by the victors, right? Not by those who were defeated. So everything here is from a theological, God-centric perspective. 22. But the word of God came to Shemaiah, the man of God, he was the prophet, tell Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, and the house of Judah and Benjamin, and the rest of the people. This is what the Lord says. You must not go up and fight against your brothers, the Israelites. Every one of you go home, for this thing is from me. So they listened, and the word of the Lord, and so they listened to the word of the Lord and went home again according to the word of the Lord. What do you think it was? What does it mean? Right? It's just like in some movies we see that this small guy in the pub says, just hold me before I'll kill him. So Rehoboam is making go, I'm going to kill. But the Lord told me not to, so I'm going back home. Okay, it's just to save face, so thank God for God. So that's one way to read it, or you can just read it without any cynicism, but I really think there is sort of a joke here, especially now when we understand how much stronger Israel was than Judah, that Rehoboam really had close to nothing, right? There was no way for him to defeat them. So he said, I'm going to, but the Lord said no, so no. 25. This is even, we take the whole discussion further now. Jeroboam, right, who is now the king of Israel, of the northern kingdom, built up Shechem in the hill country. Do you see Shechem on the map? Okay. It's a very important place in the north. It's the place where the ancestors, all of them except of Rachel, are buried. The cave of Machpelah, the ancestral burial plot of our ancestors, is in Shechem. So you already know that it was a very important city, okay, definitely for the north. So he first built Jeroboam built up Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. From there he went out to build Penuel. He kept building. Next verse. Jeroboam said in his heart, which is really nice, now the kingdom will return to the house of David. If these people go up to offer sacrifices in the Lord's house at Jerusalem, their heart will turn again to their Lord, Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and return to Rehoboam. So the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold. He said to the people, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold, your God Israel, who brought you up of the land of Egypt. There is a lot going on here, right? Look at Jerusalem on the map in Judah. You see Jerusalem? How relevant is the location of Jerusalem when now we're talking about 2 separate kingdoms? It's really close to the border. So just according to the text here, what did Jeroboam, the king of Israel, said to himself? My people now, when they want to worship, they'll go to the familiar place. What was the familiar worship place for these people? What has been the place for over 70 years? Jerusalem. So they will go to Jerusalem. Now, when you go to Jerusalem, what's going to happen? You worship there, and then you start liking that place, and your loyalty may shift to the king of Judah, right? Do you get this argument that he had? That I don't want my people to worship at my enemy's temple. So what do? You build 2 temples. You build a temple, but he was smarter than that. He was really smart. He built 2 temples. One of them, try to find it, is Bethel. You see it? Where is it? Just at the border, okay? So even if people from Israel wanted to go to Jerusalem, they had a closer place. Right now they have a temple in Bethel, so why even bother to go to Jerusalem? And now go all the way up north of Israel, and you see Dan, he built another place. So now people can choose. If you live closer to the north, you can go to Dan. If you live closer to the south of Israel, you go to Bethel. So instead of only one place of worship, as was the case during the times of David and Solomon, he offered 2 others. Of course, the Torah, the Bible here described it as a huge sin. Why is it a huge sin? Because when David became the king, he decided that Jerusalem is not only the capital of the new United Kingdom of Israel and Judah, it's also the only legitimate place to worship God. So today, you can go to any synagogue you want, right? Wherever you're in the world, you want to worship, you can go to any synagogue. But during the time of David and Solomon, there was only one legitimate place to worship, the temple in Jerusalem. Even if you lived further away, you had to schlep to Jerusalem. What if you decided to worship God outside of Jerusalem, to sacrifice somewhere else? It was considered a sin. Okay? So David, in order to consolidate his power, he focused everything on one city, Jerusalem. Everything outside of Jerusalem was forbidden. Now, why Jerusalem? David was also a smart man, because David owned Jerusalem. Literally owned Jerusalem. Jerusalem was initially not part of the Jewish territory. It was a Jebusite city. So David occupied it, occupied Jerusalem from the Jebusite, turned it into the capital, political and religious capital of his kingdom. But all the time it was his private city. Even today, when you visit Jerusalem, they take you to the city of David. Literally the city of David, okay? So no tribe could argue that Jerusalem belongs to them. It belonged to David and then to Solomon. It was his private property. Not exactly, but Washington, D.C., when you think about it, right, does not belong to any state. Does not belong to a person yet, but it does not belong to any state. Jerusalem belonged to David, okay? And that's why all the prophets started to say that the only legitimate place to worship God is in Jerusalem. Jeroboam said, no, I don't buy it. Jerusalem might be a nice place, you can go there. By the way, it was not a nice place during the time of Rehoboam. It was just a little hilly place, not really important. Come to either Bethel or to Dan. We don't have a lot in Bethel, but on your next visit, if you go all the way up north, you can go to Tel Dan. There are amazing archaeological excavations there from the time of ancient Israel, of Jeroboam, and remnants of the temple that he built. So yes, it's quite incredible what they were able to find. Recently, I'm talking about 1990s. I'm not talking about a million years ago. Yeah, they discovered a lot of things there. Okay, any questions? Because I want to go back to these two verses that I read. I go back and forth between politics, archaeology, and the Bible and theology. So let's look again at these 26, 27. Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom will return to the house of David. If these people go up to offer sacrifice in the Lord's house at Jerusalem, their heart will turn again to their Lord and to Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and return to Rehoboam. So far, so good. So he said, yeah, I don't want my people to go to the enemy's territory. 28. So the king took counsel. And here you're going to ask yourself, what? He took counsel and made 2 calves of gold. He said to the people, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold, your gods Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. 29. He set one in Bethel and the other one in Dan. This thing became a sin. The people went as far as Dan to worship before God. He made shrines on the high places and appointed priests from among all the people who were not Levites. Jeroboam instituted a festival in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, like the festival in Judah, and he went up to the altar. He did likewise at Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made, and at Bethel he installed the priest of the high places he had made. He went up to the altar, which he had made in Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month, the month he had devised from his own heart, and he instituted a festival for the Israelites and went up to the altar to make offerings. So here, the authors of the Bible are so devastated by what Jeroboam did. He not only built 2 temples that are not in Jerusalem, he made golden calves and called them God. Okay? Well, this is not true. This is not true. Before I'll tell you why it's not true, this chapter was written by the people of Judah, who didn't like Israel for some of the reasons I mentioned. Why was it written by Judah, and why our Bible basically was written by the people of Judah and not by the people of Israel? Because this year, now we are around 930 BCE. At 722 BCE, look at the map, you see these big red Aram, Damascus, which will become Assyria. They will become an empire. And because Israel was so attractive, remember the trade route that I mentioned that goes from Egypt up. All this green, lush area with all the food and the grain, all the beautiful things, okay? And when they had the strength and the power, they defeated Israel. They conquered Israel because they want what Israel had. They didn't occupy Judah. Why? They didn't really need it. Why wasting all this energy, all these soldiers, for getting very little? So at 722, about less than 200 years afterwards, there is no Israel. There's only Judah. That's why we are the Jewish people, the descendants of Judah. Okay? The descendants of Judah wrote the story. So when you are a Judean who writes about your enemy from the north, well, you don't like what they do. Okay? So their houses of worship are not legitimate, and you attribute to them a huge sin of not worshiping the invisible God, but of making two calves and referring to these calves as gods. And I can tell you that nobody did such a thing. And I'll tell you why. What is a calf? It's a baby bull. Okay, it's a baby bull, a baby ox. A bull was a very common image of the gods of the ancient Near East. Not that people thought that the bull is the god, but very often when they had a statue of a king, they placed it over a bull. Because when you think about it, until the 18th century, the bull was the strongest vehicle. All the fields were plowed by oxen. They were the stronger thing, okay? Go down to downtown Manhattan by Wall Street. What's the biggest statue there? A bull. You want to have a bull market, right? So the bull was the image that everyone shared of the strongest animal, and that was the pedestal of the gods, okay? What Jeroboam did was to build these bulls, like that was the style, and upon them was nothing, because the God of Israel was invisible. So what he said was, this is your invisible God of Israel who sits over these bulls, okay? Now, if you think that the people of Judah did not have a pedestal for God, you are mistaken. Have you heard of the cherubim? The cherubim are these creatures with outstretched wings. It's like a sphinx, a body of a beast and a face of a human being. So in the Temple of Jerusalem, the pedestal for God was the cherubim, which was good, legitimate. So if God sits upon the cherubim, it's fine. But if God sits upon a bull, that's an idolatry, okay? So, because again, it was written by the people in the south. But why do they call them calves? Why not bulls? To ridicule them, right? Like, oh, they have these baby bulls. So they call them calves. Do you remember a story about the golden calf from somewhere? Okay. So when Moses went up on Mount Sinai to receive the tablets, to receive the Torah from God, the people down there thought that Moses disappeared. They went to Aaron and told him, your brother Moses died, make us a god. So Aaron said to them, okay, bring me all the gold that you have, all the jewelry, off your earrings and nose earrings, the whole thing, melt them, and lo and behold, what came out? A golden calf. Now, it's not very likely, you can try it if you want, that if you melt all the gold that you have and put it in the fire, there will be a golden calf. Probably you'll get nothing, but right? But that's what was there, and it's described as the biggest sin of the people of Israel. Idolatry, and they worship this golden calf. Why is it there? Because it was, and they use exactly the same words as in the book of Kings, to remind us that what the people of Israel have been doing is the greatest sin. So the story of the golden calf was inserted later on to the Bible, just to make it, so people hear golden calf, this is the greatest sin ever. okay? So let me just summarize, and then we'll go a little bit further with the story, and we will end. So for 70 years, there was one united kingdom under David and Solomon. But then they couldn't really get along. The Torah, the Bible, describe it. What was the story in the Bible? What's the reason that the north separated itself from the south? Rehoboam was too arrogant, right? Maybe, probably not the case. It seems like the kingdom of Israel got sick and tired supporting its poor, annoying Judah. It happens all the time in history. You have nations, and one part is wealthy, work hard, and contribute the most, and their taxes have to support the rest, right? In Italy, they complain all the time about it, right? And in other places, why should we support them? Just let's separate. So that was probably more likely when you look at it through the eyes of politics and economy. We don't want to support these people. They have nothing to offer us. So yeah, David was strong and David was able to, but we don't need it anymore. It costs us too much. Let's split. So that probably was the case. For about 200 years, Israel and Judah did not have a good relationship. Judah accused Israel of worshiping idols. Their temples were illegitimate. Everything they did was wrong, and we have the Bible to prove that. But 722, the Assyrians occupied Israel. An important thing that happened was that at least 100,000 people from Israel escaped to Judah. Still your brothers and sisters, right? Where would you go? You go to the other nation that shares so much with you. And we see it, and when you look at the archaeological excavations, it's fascinating to see that Jerusalem got 5 times bigger almost every night. And they can date it. It's so beautiful today to see, right? We have the carbon-14, which helps us to date. And more I read in the last year or so, how the new methods of archaeology using AI to date things even more accurately. So it's really fascinating what's happening in this field today. But we know that Jerusalem overnight grew dramatically, and Israel doubled in size. Judah doubled in size in a very short time. What happened to the rest of the people of Israel after the Assyrians conquered them? Have you heard the term the 10 lost tribes? So until recently, the idea was that the Assyrians exiled all the people of Israel, the 10 tribes, right? There were 10 tribes in Israel and 1 tribe or 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin in Judah. So the Assyrians conquered them and exiled them, and they all disappeared. These are the 10 lost tribes. Well, it's also not really true. You know how many people from Israel were exiled by the Assyrians? 27,000. And I told you before, there were between 300 and 400,000 people there. Because the Assyrians did not want everyone. They exiled only the elite. They exiled the kings, the political elite. They exiled the military elite. They exiled the intellectuals, the scribes, those who know how to write and read. The vast majority of the people did not have these skills. And they exiled the artisans. But the vast majority of the people were poor, uneducated farmers. They didn't need them. Okay, so they exiled only the top elite. So half of the people from Israel, or a large part of them, escaped to Judah. which brought to a much greater growth of Judah. And the rest stayed there and became what we call today the Sumerians, which later on they didn't like for different reasons. Now, after 722, again, there is no more Israel, there is a greater Judah. But at 586, again, BCE, the Babylonians destroyed Judah. And now we have the elite of Judah living outside of the area because the Babylonians exiled the elite of Judah. The political elite, the military elite, the scribes, the intellectuals, and the artisans. And during that period, around 586 BC, we're talking about 2,500 years ago, that's when these stories were written in Babylon by the scribes of Judah, telling the history of the Jews, basically. Okay? Since they came from Judah, they hated the kingdom of Israel. So their goal was to glorify the southern kingdom of Judah and to describe the northern kingdom as the source of all evil, of all the sins, and because of their sins, the Jews lost because God was angry. Okay, so the Bible, as you have it, was written not by those who won, by those who survived. And who survived? Judah. Who didn't survive? The northern kingdom of Israel. Okay, so the first lesson that I wanted to teach today was the first split of the Jews. From surviving 70 years as a united kingdom, we split into two kingdoms that on many occasions fought against each other. They just couldn't find common ground. Until one of them disappeared, some merged into the other, and we have Judea for a while. Next week, I'm going to go about 500 years afterwards, when we have only Jews now. We don't have Israel, we don't have any of the northern kingdom. And I'm going to explore what happened to our people about 2,000 years ago. What they started to fight over and how it split them in a way that, again, almost destroyed our nation. And in many ways, this is the beginning of Christianity. Okay, but that's for next week. I wanted to start with the source, with the Bible. That happened, the split, at 930 BCE, almost 3,000 years ago. We'll skip about 1,000 years to the next huge conflict that will lead to the destruction of the Second Temple and a huge split, etc. Any questions or comments or anything? Just 1 second, Alba will.
Thank you. Are you familiar with the myth of Gilgamesh? Is that the Sumerians, correct?
Of course, yes.
So they
That's
were
much more ancient.
Oh,
than the
they
Bible.
became, so the Jews became Sumerians, a different place, not Sumeria, but you said the Jews went to
Yeah,
Samaria?
The story of Gilgamesh took place more than 1,000 years, even 1,500 years before, okay? Now, this is the same territory, more or less, because the borders there were very flexible. Not only that I'm familiar with Gilgamesh, but the writers, the authors of the Bible were quite familiar with Gilgamesh, to the extent that the story of Noah and the flood in our Bible was pretty much lifted from the Gilgamesh epic. That's fascinating. Oh, I promise to dedicate a class. No, you take the Gilgamesh epic on one side, and then you take the Bible on the other side, and it's, oh my God, it's so similar, but not identical. And that's the fascinating things, to see how the biblical authors lifted the story, but changed little details to fit into their values, their agenda, their theology. But the same thing with the legal system. You're talking about that the Ugarit, and the Code of Hammurabi from Mesopotamia is pretty much the basis for the legal system in the Bible, only that it was changed dramatically. The legal system in Israel started as the British legal system, okay, because they controlled the area for a long time. And with time, it became different, but you have to start from somewhere. Okay, so that's the Gilgamesh.
Just one quick look. Sumeria and Sumeria are two different places? Same place?
Again, it's a little bit like Canaan that we talk about, right? Like you ask about Canaan. Sometimes it talks about specific city, okay? And even today, it's a political thing. Some would say West Bank. So, you know, people who call the area West Bank are left of center. Those who call it Judea and Samaria are right of center. Okay, so it's the same territory. So Samaria is either specific place or a whole region. You know, very many people call America, the US, America, right? America is bigger than the United States, but when somebody says America, they don't think about Canada, okay? It's America, it's the US. So it's true about the biblical times too. So Canaan sometimes was the whole region, sometimes it was a specific state, the same there. Yes, it's confusing, but not for them because they understood it from the context. But when you read it 3,000 years later, oops. Okay, I hope it was not confusing. I hope that you learned something that you didn't know about our roots. And I hope that you will join me. Is it next week? Next week. Thank you.